Hello World Group 8, and today we'll present the Chapter 7, the planning strategies. So first I'm going to introduce the L2 production model. This model is basically described by Claude and Clerk, and this is to discuss about the process when the L2 learner is constructing a speech. The model has 3 different programs, and the planning program, the articulator program, and the model program, which means the actual production. The previous 2, the planning program and articulator program, do not follow in linear fashion. You can see on the PowerPoint slide. The user, which means the learner, may move backwards and forwards from the planning to execution. So here I'm going to talk about the planning program. The planning program is generally a top-down process, starting from the first communicative goal and all the way down to the most fundamental constituent. The communicative goal is to set up a situation like to tell a story, to ask a question, or to give a speech. And the discourse plan will reflect how the communicative goal will be realized. It might be through dialogue or monologue, or to what extent the discourse is conversational or require a unique to spatial planning for the style or structure. After that, the third one is the sentence plan. The sentence plan involve outline the constituent structure of each utterance, and the discourse plan and the sentence plan together can form a skeleton, which means the supporting framework of a context. And the fourth stage is constituent plans. In this stage, learners learn to decide each constituent. The constituent means the basic unit of a sentence. And however, the learners don't actually need to build plans for every constituent. The example is like when you want to, the example is I'm stating a situation. The example is like when you want to question your doctor about why you don't feel better after taking all the pills. So in this situation, the common goal will be to question your doctor. And then the discourse plan is the style of structure of the conversation. The sentence plan is to use some interrogative sentence, and also you need to equip some basic medical knowledge, just in case the doctor will say something that you are not familiar with, like some of the proper nouns. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about the articulated program. So there are 5 stages in this program, and here I use the previous example to explain the 5 stages. So the meaning selection here is the learner try to decide whether each word can properly convey their idea. So in this case, it might be the terms that can express doubt or question. So the second one, the syntactic outline, would be the interrogative sentences. Learner would tend to use aggressive words to strengthen their argument, to deliver their idea for questioning. So the affix and function word is about the tense of inflection, like the suffix ed or ing. When learners want to emphasize the action, they will choose to use the structure of to plus verb. Example is I love to sleep. This sentence focuses on the action of sleep. So on the contrary, when the learner wants to emphasize the timing, they will choose to use V plus ing. The example is like I was sleeping when mom came home. So in this sentence, the main focus is on the moment when mom came home. Focus on the timing. So they use verb plus ing. And the next one is the 2 strategies that the L2 learners would use in the L2 production model. So the first one, I'll introduce the manual strategies. The strategy is proposed by Littlewood. He proposed 2 sets of strategies based on the L2 production model. The manual strategy, The minimal strategies is one of the two, often represent the production in early stage of SLA. The strategies involve different ways when learners simplifying both the constituent planning processes and the articulated stages in 3 ways. The first one is semantic simplification, proposed by Alice. Learners may not plan for all major constituents of the sentence. Instead, they may plan only the minimal numbers of unshared meaning elements to eliminate the unnecessary words, allowing the situational context to stand in for those missing. Example for this simplification is when your mom asks you what time will you leave school and come home. So the semantic simplified version would be when will you be back? Just omit the 2 different meanings and just converge into one. So another type of simplification occurs in the articulatory program when learners choose to use only content words and to omit affix and function with mention. This may occur either because the learner has not yet constructed hypotheses for those aspects of L2, means they don't have sufficient knowledge of L2, or because the processing pressures which do not permit him to make a thorough search of his linguistic resources, which means when you are in a short period of time, you'll feel nervous and you can thoroughly search your mind to find the linguistic resources to support your idea. So you may omit some affix or function word. So the third type of simplification may take place in motor program. In other words, the sounds may be omitted in the actual language production. The example is like when we say 3 kinds of structures, the S after the suffix S after the kinds may sometimes will be omitted. So next one is the maximal strategies. The maximal strategies often occur when the learner has developed both sufficient L2 knowledge and adequate control over the language. Therefore, the learners can remove the need to rely on shared knowledge. Also, advanced learners who use maximal strategies involve the ability to use stylistic markers such as those relating to politeness. Therefore, the early stage production is likely to be marked by the reduction of model verbs. Example of model verbs is that when people try to make a reservation to a restaurant, the early stage production would be, can I make a reservation? However, the proper and polite one should be, could I make a reservation? That's the more proper one and have more politeness. So the later production will feature the use of those model verbs such as can. You can distinguish the can and could. And the example of adding the adverbial expression is like, I entered the theater after the film had begun. So when you add the adverbial expression, it would be like, I entered the theater quietly after the film had begun, or I entered the theater in silence. Use the adverbial expression to deliver your idea more properly. So the maximal strategies are reflected in the complexification of the interlanguage system. So after that, Tyler will present the later part of our presentation.
So now we have covered the introduction of production strategy. Now we want to dive in and to see what are those strategies that we want to think about, that we want to discuss today. So there will be 2, planning strategy and correcting strategy. Correcting strategy will be explained at a later section. Now, planning strategy. What is planning strategy? Planning strategy is L2 learners, they use their existing resources and maximizing their existing resources to fit the purpose of their conversation, the purpose of their audiences. So it often happens in an early stage of SLA, and obviously it is because they are lack of enough L2 knowledge to produce such complicated audiences. So they use it in an easier way. And as we move on to the end of the interlanguage continuum, less strategy will be implemented. So what are So planning strategy can be divided into two simple principles. The first is semantic simplification, which you can find on page 178, and linguistic simplification on page 179. So let's start with semantic simplification. Semantic simplification. So, semantic simplification is to reduce the propositional elements. And I want to address the proposition here does not refer to the syntactic way, syntactic structure, like by, in, on, under. It is more about the semantic meaning of a sentences. So, what is semantic simplification in a simpler way is that they delete some constituents that are not syntactic but semantic. In another way, it means that when we first start learning English, you will see that a lot of L2 learners in the early stage of SLA, they will use easier method, easier structure, easier vocabulary to describe things in front of them or the thing that they want to address. So here's two examples. Let's say Tom is an SLA, is an L2 learner of English, and especially in the early stage of SLA. So when he wants to say the word spine, let's say he does not acquire spine in his interlanguage. And when he wants to refer the thing in the back, the bone right here, he will say the bone in the back or backbone because he has not acquired spine in his interlanguage. And the next example is more sentence-wise. If Sean say an offensive joke to Tom, and Tom definitely don't like it at all, he may be intended to say, I don't appreciate your joke about the politically sensitive issue that you have already known that I have problems with. In this situation, Tom may not appreciate, he may not understand what is appreciate, may not understand what is politically sensitive issue, or he may not acquire relative clauses in his interlanguage. So instead, he will use, I hate that joke, or I don't like the joke, or stop it, words that will reach the same purpose of the utterances, but in a simpler structure, in a simpler way. That is semantic simplification. Cut down the extra and go to the point. So what does that reflect on L2 learners? What does that say about L2 learners? There are two things. First of all, the availability of linguistic resources of L2 learners. Obviously, from what we can see right here, we can see that Tom does not acquire this and that. That means that we can see how much does the L2 learner have acquired in his interlanguage continuum. Or the limits of his linguistic resources, the pool of the linguistic resources. The second one is that in the situation, how does the L2 learner is going to use his existing resources to reach the maximally informative, to be maximally informative. The best way to describe things for him in this situation, the particular vocabulary. That is semantic simplification. And now goes on to another one, which is linguistic simplification. So the next section in planning strategy, we're going to talk about linguistic simplification. What is it? It is the omission of foreign words and affixes. So I mainly focus on morpheme, syntax, and structures. So basically, to put it in a simple way, it is grammatical errors. So you might ask, then what is the difference between errors and linguistic simplification? Well, the answer is rather easy. It is actually errors. But some scholars don't see the error as an error. They see it in a different perspective and see this as a linguistic simplification or learner's production strategy right now. So it is a general language production of L2 learners because everyone make the mistake, everybody has those grammatical problems before. So here's an example. I driving a car. Obviously, in here, this example is very similar to the example on the book. It's omit the word am, the aux be, I am driving a car. So, in this situation, it will be linguistic simplification if if, let's say, he has produced Oxby in his previous utterances, so we know that Oxby has already been in his interlanguage continuum. So we can say that is linguistic simplification. So linguistic simplification is he can only simplify what he have acquired. He cannot simplify what he doesn't acquire before. So in the later sections, Meisel brings out another simplification, restrictive simplification. It is a simplification that only happens to a particular specific contents only. For example, it is focusing on the interlocutor, the level of competence between interlocutors. For example, when mother talking to his children, or when the foreigner when American talking to English L2 learners, especially in the early stage of SLA, who cannot manipulate word as in a later stage of SLA learners. So it is the higher level of competence to a lower level of competence. So you might see that a mother talking to his children might not use a complicated sentence like we have said previously. He will use some word that may not be grammatically true, but it's easy to convey what she's trying to say. Where in our when we first start learning English, some American talking to us, he will not use some complicated sentences. He will use some sentences that may have some grammatical problems, but in order to make us understand what we are saying. Next page. Next page. Laura, next page. Okay, sorry. So the next strategy we're going to talk about is correcting strategy. We focus on monitoring while, before the articulation, during the articulation, and after the articulation. So a great scholar, Krashen, he brings out a model of L2 performances. He divided knowledge into two sections, implicit knowledge and explicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge is more intuitive, and as Krashen would call them, acquisition. For example, I'm a Taiwanese. Chinese is my native Chinese is my native language. When I speak Chinese, I don't really think about the structure of it. I don't really think about the grammatical rules. I don't really think about which word should be where, the order of the sentence, the order of the words. I just pour them out. I just say it without really thinking about it. And that is more intuitive. And on the contrary, explicit knowledge is more analytical and more metalinguistic, as Krashen would call them, learning. Like, I take English as my second language. When I first started learning English, I would think the teacher would teach us, especially in the classroom environment, they will teach us the grammatical rules, the structure of it, and how we should position the verb and subjects and objects so that we can learn faster. It is more analytical. And Krashen believes that when we initiate our utterances, we use our implicit knowledge to speak, but we use explicit knowledge, which is the more analytical structure, to monitor our productions right now. But it brings some criticism, because some scholars believe that is too narrow-minded. They think that we can monitor our utterances with both explicit and implicit knowledge right now. But in this book, the author are not trying to address this part a lot. He's trying to address this issue of monitoring into a bigger in a larger pictures. Next page. So he brings out Morrison and Law. Morrison and Law talk about an idea like what I said before. Monitoring can happen before the articulation, during the articulation, and after articulation. Think about it. When we first start our utterances, we think about what we're going to say and what we say is better. And we say it. And when we say it, we are still monitoring ourselves. Like, I'm talking right now, but my brain is still monitoring my production and use the production strategy to reach the goal that I want. And after the production strategy it will be, I go home and I watch the video and I think about what could be say is better and could be clearer for the presentations. So Morrison et al. Also brings out the idea of substitution of preferred form. What is that? For example, when we all have this experience. We stay at home, we sit in front of our computer, and we are preparing for our tomorrow's presentation. What do? We practice a lot of time, like 4, 5, 6 times a lot. But the first time is always horrible. We're tumbling apart. There's a lot of filler words. We are not satisfied by that. But as we practice more and more and more, we start to become smoother and become more comfortable what we are saying and more comfortable on stage so that we will not make a lot of mistakes, not a lot of filler words. So what is essential is between those two productions utterances. It is about, in the between, we monitor ourselves. We think about what could be said, it could be better, so that would be a preferred form. We will replace the original form with the preferred form, so the next time we can be better. And the substitution will happen in 3 situations. The first one, at any stage in articulatory program. That means that before we utter our performances, we think about what we're going to say. At any stage, even though we are at the end of the articulatory programming, we are still monitoring ourselves and may go back to the original part. The next one is adjustment in communicative goals or discourse plans. So what is that? If there is a communication goal shift from shaming someone to persuading someone, we will have a different goal. Or discourse plan, the group that you're with is no longer exists, or you switch to a different group who use another discourse plan. The third one will be you are in a totally different situation. We require a different format, and that could fit the purpose better. So you will create a different preferred forms. The next one is that substitution can also happen when there is no difficulties is experienced. That means that when you're talking to your friends in a coffee shop, you're having a great time, you are still monitoring yourself and monitor your production as well with no difficulty experienced. So to sum up, those strategies, they are a way of maximizing the existing resources in an easy and efficient manner for the algebra learner to fit their purposes the best. And it is rather more of a production strategy rather than a communication strategy, because it is about juggling the ball that you have right now instead of having all the balls and thinking about like where it goes where. Yeah, that is the end of the presentation. Thank you.